Well, welcome to this week's virtual service. I thought I'd relocate today and come over into our church building in Slight Lane and have this wonderful banner behind me that we made in the year 2000. And this banner reminds us of our history in this place, our connectedness to Wormley and the surrounding area, and all the things that God has done in the past amongst us and through us. And this banner, as well as looking back to these great events, reminds us that God is with us. And if God has been with us in the past and is with us, as I believe he is in the present, we've experienced that in our worship together over the last few weeks, then it also tells us, doesn't it? It reminds us as we look forward that God will continue to be with us and work in us and through us. And we can look forward with hope and expectation because our God is faithful. And we can look forward to him doing great things in this area amongst his people, amongst the world that we live in. And on that note, shall we begin this morning in song, a song that proclaims how great our God is. You're a good, good Father.
But I've heard the tender whisper of love in the dead of night, and you tell me that you're pleased and that I'm never alone. You're a good, good Father. It's who you are. It's who you are. It's who you are. And I'm loved by you. That's who I am. It's who I am. It's who I am. Oh, and I've Father. It's who you are. It's who you are. It's who you are. And I'm loved by you. It's who I am. It's who I am. It's who I am.
So as I said, this banner reminds us of what God has done amongst us in the past. But I wonder, what is it that God is doing amongst us today? Over the last few weeks, we have branded this spot our family news. And my hope and prayer as we continue with that is not only would there be a chance where we can share what events we're doing together, whether they be virtual or maybe in the coming weeks gradually becoming things we can do physically together. Maybe we can also share bits and pieces of our news, our stories of our life with God. What have we got coming up this week? Well, I'll hand over to a few friends who are going to share some of the highlights in the days ahead.
Prayer meeting is on Monday at 9:30. You are all invited. And if you cannot make it, please send your request to Liliana or myself. It could be for your friend, a neighbor, a relative. Remember, nothing is too hard for our God to do. He is the way maker, miracle worker, promise keeper, and light in the darkness. So we see you tomorrow at 9:30.
Hello everybody, and welcome again to the Sunday morning. I just want to say a little bit about Alpha. Alpha started online on Tuesday at 5 o'clock. It's a really fun time. It's a time to bring your questions, your doubts, your difficulties, and above all, your friends. So don't worry if you feel, people missed the first one. We can easily accommodate them. We had a really good time. There were some people that we didn't know and some that we did. And so Tuesday was good. We asked for two things really. One, invite people to come. Two, pray for a real harvest from this. It's an exciting project, and we're blessed to be able to run it. Thanks very much.
Hello. Ben's asked me to introduce the Bible study every Wednesday at 8 o'clock on Zoom. You should have the link on your weekly email. We've been going through Revelation. What a book. I must admit, I hadn't been to any of the Wormley Bible studies before that, so I wasn't sure what to expect. I found out they are really good. Lots of opportunity to ask questions and to explore this wonderful, mysterious, complicated, poetic book. It's not always been that serious at times. We've sometimes discussed whether the Seven Hills relates to Rome or to Sheffield. I think we came to the conclusion we were talking about Rome. But I would encourage you to come along if you haven't tried them before. They're very friendly. You feel there are opportunities to ask questions, to listen, and certainly to come away with a greater understanding of this wonderful book. So come and join us this week. I look forward to seeing you.
So thank you to my friends who helped me, or our friends who helped us out this morning in recording the family news. And indeed, thank you to everyone over the weeks who have and who continue to contribute to our services and our chat and our life together. I've been really encouraged by the effort people have put in ensuring that we remain a family in these days when we can't meet together so easily, and continuing to explore and encourage each other in our faith. Well, this week, when it came to record our talk, we did it outside. We did it slightly differently. But walking back from the talk, and I will show you that in a moment, walking back from the talk, I travelled down the New River. And if you've never walked down by the New River, I really encourage you to do so. But as I walked along the side of this man-made river and watched the goings on in it, on it and above it, I felt God prompting me with some thoughts. And so I popped out and recorded them, and I'm going to share them now.
If you were to leave the church at Slight Plain, cross the main road and continue going, there's a little cut through, and you can walk through to the New River, which this is. And this has been very much, along with Lee Valley River and Vark, my second home during this time of lockdown. It's been a great place to come and walk, a great place to come and think and find space, but also for me a great place to come and enjoy the wonders of God's creation, which is all around. In previous years, I've always had an interest in nature, and I've always had an interest in birds. I've been a keen bird watcher for garden birds, but also birds out there, more in the wild as well. And I've long had a soft spot for birds of prey. I've really enjoyed watching the red kites that are gradually coming and colonising our area. But over this period, this last year or so, I've fallen in love with the birds you can find in and on and around the river. There's nothing more beautiful to watch than a kingfisher flying past. In the background now, I've got various, actually call them various, I didn't quite see what it was, could have been a black-headed tern or something like that, zipping along the river. You might just think of a seagull. We have various varieties, similar birds like that here. We have the ducks, the mallards, with their gorgeous heads for the men, and the women of that wonderful motley brown colour. We have the coots with their white skull caps. We have the moorhens who have a more red skull cap. All sorts of different birds. If you're lucky, you go and see a grebe on the River Lee. You can go and see cormorants flying along, and they do this. They swim along and then they duck under the water and they go underneath, and they could be there for ages. And you think, what's happened? Then they suddenly bob up, 10, 20, 30 metres down the river. Something like a minute later. Absolutely incredible feat of athleticism and breath holding. All these birds have a wonderful difference between them. They all have their own little niche, their own thing to contribute. And it made me wonder, which of these birds would I be if I was a bird? Would I be like a duck swimming on the surface and occasionally bobbing my bottom up in the air? Would I be like a cormorant swimming along and then going underwater and swimming for ages underwater? Would I be like the kingfisher, radiant in his outfit and diving? Would I be like one of the white birds I can see flying behind me now? And I've seen that there's two sorts. There's the sort with a whole black head, and they tend to fly high, then dip down into the water, catch something, come up again. And then there is one that just has a black cap on top, and they tend to skirt very close to the surface and duck down to catch their food. They do things differently. And then there are the swallows or the martins or the swifts. I'm not quite sure which one it is. I need to double check. I could get confused. But they kind of also skim along and catch their food. So all different sorts of birds with their own songs, their own place on the river. Of course, I've forgotten to mention the geese and the swans. There's so much life out here at the moment. But each one is different. And yet, put them together, and they become this rich, glorious family, and I've loved spending time watching them. And it strikes me, isn't that just like people? We are all different, aren't we? Some of us are glorious flyers, some of us look great, some of us are good at different things, different talents, and put us all together, and we become this rich tapestry of humanity. So often we spend our time thinking, I wish I could be like that person. I wish I could be like that person. Maybe we should spend more time looking at ourselves and thinking, look at what God has made me like. Look at what God has given me. This is my job, my place. And together with others, we make a rich tapestry of the human race. And indeed, yes, of course, the church as well. So I'd like to pray about this. Shall we pray? Heavenly Father, thank you that many of us in this time have had the chance to reconnect with nature, to reconnect with the creation around us, that the planet and the wildlife. For me, I thank you for the birds that we've seen along the riverbanks. Lord, they have reminded me that we are all different and yet all important. Some of us have beautiful song, some of us look incredible, some of us amazing talents of putting things into practice. Some of us are good at communicating, some of us are good at doing different things. You have made each one of us unique. We all have our own activity, the own thing that you've given us to contribute, that we are special because of it. Lord, help us to celebrate and enjoy the differences amongst us. Help us to value that. And yet at the same time, help us to be united, held together, because we are all your people, made by you and created in your image. Thank you, Father. Amen.
Well, today's reading comes from Colossians chapter 1, and Cindy is going to read from us, starting from verse 15. Thank you, Cindy.
Colossians 1 verse 15 to 23. He is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation. For by him all things were created, things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or powers or rulers or authorities. All things were created by him and for him. He is before all things, and in him all things hold together. And he is the head of the body, the church. He is the beginning and the firstborn from among the dead, so that in everything he might have the supremacy. For God was pleased to have all his fullness dwell in him, and through him to reconcile to himself all things, whether things on earth or things in heaven, by making peace through his blood shed on the cross. Once you were alienated from God and were enemies in your minds because of your evil behavior, but now he has reconciled you by Christ's physical body through death to present you holy in his sight, without blemish and free from accusation, if you continue in your faith, established and firm, not moved from the hope held out in the gospel. This is the gospel that you heard, and that has been proclaimed to every creature under heaven, and of which I, Paul, have become a servant.
Well, I thought today we could do something a little bit different. Over the last few weeks we've been looking at things around what it means to be united, what it means to deal with differences and places where we disagree, or maybe we are different kinds of people. How as a church we respond to that. And I thought today, rather than another sermon as such, learning from what we did with Wynne, I thought I'd come and have a chat in Wormley Woods with, I found Mr. David Lockett just standing around the corner a moment ago. Now, it might not seem it from where you are, but we are 2 metres apart. Now, we're doing funny things with perspective here. I'm having to crouch in order to be at the same level as David, who is standing Lord of the Rings style 2 metres behind me. So if I stand up, I appear like Gandalf, and he appears like one of the hobbits. But that's another story.
And he's got hairy feet.
Well, I'm not going to show that on camera, though. But I've been thinking a lot this week about, yes, he's already twitching to go. I've been thinking a lot this week about what it means to be church, what we're called to be. And one of the themes I've kept coming back to is that of God bringing us all together, regardless of who we are, what we're like, what our backgrounds are, and things like that. And I thought what I'd do today is maybe have a conversation with Dave about his views on some of these things, but also how we respond when it doesn't work, when maybe within the church there are differences of opinion, but also maybe when we see differences between us and those around us, or when we see injustice in the world where people aren't treating each other as equal. And so I'm standing here in the wood with a microphone and Dave. I've got no idea really where this conversation is going to go, but I thought maybe I would start by asking David a sort of an opening question around some of his past, because David let slip in an email earlier on that in the past he was involved in protests. And I wonder, Dave, if you'd like to share with us what those protests were and why you felt led to get involved. I have washed my hands and I'm not going to touch any part of the mic, but if you want to feel safe with that.
That's probably the best way of doing it, yeah. Well, I wasn't really a general protester, so I didn't really get involved in a lot of protests. But as a student, there was something that touched me, and I think there were a number of things that led me to protest in one context, and that was when I was in my second and third year at university. Shared a flat with two guys, Peter and Sager. And Sega was Malaysian. He's a lovely guy. He was a very friendly and open and conversationalist and so on. And we used to talk about all kinds of things. And I think I can trace my kind of awakening to the kind of insidious problem of racism from Sega, from my relationship with him. And he was also, he's a very amusing guy. He was South Asian origin, so Tamil origin, and very dark skinned. Peter, our other flatmate, was blonde and very fair. And Sega used to joke with ladies in the laundrette that they were twins. But he used to joke about things like that quite a lot. He worked in a bar in Liverpool Street Station, and he used to lean on the bar and listen to the kind of casual racist diatribe coming from customers who were saying, telling him that it was all the problem of the foreigners in the country and all this kind of thing. And he used to joke about it, but I actually sensed then, and I realised even more deeply now, that it actually meant it touched him deeply, and it was pretty offensive. And so that's one of the things that led me, if you like. It led me to join the Anti-Nazi League protests in London. It was Rock Against Racism.
So you were Billy Bragg and friends?
Yes, Billy Bragg and friends, exactly. And I remember some great times. It wasn't just the beer and the music, but we did dance to Tom Robinson Band in Victoria Park. But it was it was something I did feel strongly about. And sometimes, just a little bit, it was quite scary. Walking along, in a huge protest, but going along Brick Lane, where the streets were lined with skinheads, basically, who were taunting. So it was a little bit scary at times, but that's something that has always stayed with me. It's something I detest, and maybe I kind of sometimes react a bit too much, but I always want to try and correct people when I see not just casual racism, but sometimes deliberate offensive behaviour. So. That's a little bit of the past.
I think I can really relate to that, because I think for me, as I said the other week, I grew up in a Fenland village where everyone was white, Caucasian, born and bred in the immediate 4 or 5 miles. So there's really no intermingling, not for centuries anyway, 3 or 4 families. And I was the outsider, having moved back into that area, having been away for a number of years. And so for me, when I went to university, it really was quite a shock, an eye-opener. Like you, I think, really, to be exposed of those from other locations, other races, other nationalities, other ways of doing and seeing things. For me, it's not just meeting people from other countries, but also meeting Christians from other countries and mingling with Christians from different nations and different denominations and ways of seeing things as well. And I think that led me to think a lot about what it means to be united as the church. I was wondering, David, look, if you were to describe what you see the church as being to someone outside of the church, or rather what the church should be, you could put it either way, how would you describe it?
Oh dear, on the spot.
Can't beat the spot.
Well, we all know that the sort of the kind of definitions that we'd use, the gathering of God's people, and or representatives of Christ on earth. Maybe that's one of the most significant definitions, if you like. So if we could hold on to that one, if we members of the church decide that we are here to represent Jesus and continue his mission, then that gives us a very interesting responsibility, doesn't
it? It does. Does that mean that Jesus looks like you?
I don't think so. Looks like me.
Yeah.
I don't feel it's anything about looks, to be honest. I mean, we know that Jesus on earth had 2 legs and walked and so on, but no, I think it's about having the same heart. Yeah, so what did Jesus say and do? Jesus taught us to bear with each other. He taught us to care for each other. He taught us to look out for each other. He told the parable of the Good Samaritan,
Yeah.
which is a classic example of regardless of background, ethnicity, all those things, we're called to care for each other. And obviously by his own example, he went around with those that were the least in society, those that were outcasts, those that were called sinners, and he welcomed them. He had compassion for them. So that's the kind of example that I think we're to take on board. And I know we're not the same. We're not God. We fail very often miserably, or I should say more accurately, I fail very often miserably. But that's still the job that we're called to do.
I can't help but think, listening to what you're saying, I can't help but hearing some of the words that have become buzzwords in the world over recent years, one of which I really don't like. Words around inclusion is one of those words, and if you go in any sort of school setting, certainly that word is used a lot. The other one is tolerance, and I must confess, tolerance is a word I really don't like, because the tolerance to me says I will tolerate you, I will put up with you. Do you think God tolerates us?
It's tempting to think that way, isn't it? And in a way he does. I mean, in a perhaps a literal sense of the word, but no, of course the big difference is love, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the word we should be using. And he loves us, and I suppose the easy example that comes to our minds is the kind of love that we have for our own children. We tolerate our children when they do all kinds of things. But above all that, I mean, we don't just tolerate them, do we? We love them, and we watch them doing things that we're unhappy with sometimes, but we love them nevertheless. I think that's the right word.
So it's much more, isn't it, about an active acceptance and an active welcome, an active, you are part of us, you are included. The word inclusion, again, is one I don't really like, because it carries a certain amount of baggage, but that sense of you are welcome in our family, you are part of us, you are an equal in a sense. And one of the things I love about Wormley is I don't think we're too bad at that. Though I still think we've got a lot more we could do now. We could be a lot more, to use another buzzword, diverse, possibly, in the expressions of who we are and how we worship and our acceptance of others. But obviously recent times and situations have led us to realise that sometimes both the church and the world around us, or the world we're part of, isn't always as good at this inclusion thing as we would like to think we are, as we say we are. And I was wondering about how do we as Christians, as members of the church, as God's children, his representatives, as you describe as being, how can we respond to that, whether it's inside the church and outside the church? How do you see that as working?
Yeah, well, what Jesus did was active, wasn't it? And that's so what I'm looking for, I guess is how can we be active? How can we actively actively show love? And I think that's a really difficult one. But very often we do come across people who have been neglected or rejected by others. We can show them love. Yeah, we can do that, and so we should be active in doing that. I mean, active in looking out for that as well. One other thing that is probably more difficult, it would be very challenging, but Jesus also challenged people, and he remember how much he pointed out the kind of the Pharisaic attitudes of the time, and maybe we ought to be doing that as well. Now that's a difficult thing, because we don't want to come across as imagining ourselves to be righteous, and so it's a difficult one. But there are times when we do need to gently and kindly point out attitudes which aren't helpful, and sometimes we've been talking about racism. Well, in those situations, when we see it, I think we need to call it out, and we need to try and correct, not because we're in any way righteous, but because we want to show love and we want to spread that love.
So, as a Christian these days, I don't know if you were when you were at university, I think not. Would the David Lockett today go and protest?
Oh yes, yeah. I was quite disappointed. I did have a lot of reasons why I couldn't join Black Lives Matter protests, but they're not the least being the current lockdown. I mean, I do want to obey those sort of recommendations, if you like, those conditions, and I don't want to go out and put myself and my family at risk in that way. But yeah, I think at the moment taking to the streets isn't really practical. We have to find other ways.
Yeah. We have to find other ways, and that's interesting in these days, isn't it? I think all of us have ended up living just as much in the virtual world as I was going to say real world, but the virtual world is a real world, isn't it? It's where people are, where people interact, and we live online. And I've certainly noticed when Christians protest online, or anyone protests online, what often happens, certainly if Facebook and Twitter are anything to go by, is it very quickly degenerates into a I'm right, you're wrong, no, I'm right, you're wrong slanging match, with very little chance of either developing conversation and thinking, or anything that's productive or fruitful. I know I at times have been drawn into that. I suspect you possibly have been as well.
Yep.
Do you have any thoughts about how we as Christians, as the church, as Christ's representatives can, whether it be online or in our daily lives, engage in that kind of discussion that both points out where we're going wrong, but it encourages dialogue and something productive to come out of that, rather than just a slanging match? I expect there isn't an easy answer.
No,
have you any thoughts on that?
I don't think there is an easy answer. I mean, as far as online is concerned, yeah, I've experienced the same thing as you, and the social media is not the place, and except perhaps if there are places that you can point people to, so not to make a statement on Facebook or something like that. We've discovered over the last few years especially that's not very proactive, but to draw someone's attention to something, and one thing we could perhaps draw someone's attention to is parables, or real life stories, and so maybe if we were able to use our online presence, whether it's on Facebook or whatever, to draw people's attention to an article which might be both informative and inspiring in some way, inspiring the kind of behaviour that we're hoping to see. I think probably it's very limited what we can do online, and I think what we do face to face is really going to matter. And so I think we kind of have to decide to go out of our way to make a difference, and we can't change the world in one go. All we can do is make a difference where we are, where we are at the time, and that's by being welcoming, deliberately welcoming, and by deliberately showing openness and love to people, by sharing stories with people. Just having a conversation with someone can be amazing. Listening to them can be amazing. And it doesn't sound like much, but these are things that we can do. We can get out there and do it.
I loved your description there of being active within that, being proactive in engaging with others, and proactive in listening and hearing their experiences. and then sharing maybe some of your own experiences and opinions. And I certainly take this opportunity to thank Wynne again for the other week, where she shared with us her experiences. And I don't know how you found that, but I found that wonderful. I found it very moving, but also brought me up short as well, as I listened to her and suddenly realised that her and others in our family who I've spoken to have been carrying, like that your friend earlier on, carrying this burden that I had no idea about, because I don't sit in their shoes. I'm not from that place, and so that was very humbling. So thank you. That sharing stories, and I think there's something about sharing stories, isn't there, that is, although it becomes very personal, because they are stories and these are my experiences, or I'm listening to your experiences, it takes it away, doesn't it, from that sense of I'm right and you're wrong. This is the truth, and what you're telling me isn't the truth, and a slanging a match of statistics and ideas, but becomes something which we all recognise and can understand, whether we have had that experience or not. Sharing stories is so valuable, isn't it? It's certainly something I would love to explore further with all of us, both while we're living this online world that we are probably for a few more weeks yet at least, and when we get back into more normal living, how can we engage in conversation and share stories with others, but more importantly, how can we listen to their stories, and what creative ways can we find as well to share the stories of the Bible, and particularly those parables. There's something really powerful about parables, isn't there? They have that, as you're saying, that timeless nature that allows them to be heard in so many different contexts and times. I don't know if you have any thoughts about how we can go about doing that, David, at all, through your experiences.
Yeah, I'm not sure where my mind was going then. Was thinking about, for some reason I was diverting slightly. So I was thinking about practicing becoming empathetic.
Yep.
So we very often encounter all kinds of people, and we immediately, our natural tendency is to put them inside our own frame of reference. We see them as we see them, and we see them in the context of our lives. Mm-hmm. But try and see people in the context of their lives, and just make a deliberate effort to imagine what it's like being someone else, with the person that you're identifying with, because that can make a huge difference to your attitude. That's something that I think is really worth. It's an action that we can take, even though it doesn't sound like a lot, but it can help us to be much more understanding and help us to love.
Reminds me of a wonderful event that I heard of that started in Scandinavia. I think I shared it in a church newsletter several years ago now. The idea of having a human library. Sounds a bit surreal, doesn't it? It's not that you can go into the library and take them home for 3 weeks, and if you later return them you get fined. The idea is that you have a room full of people that you can book time with, and they're a diverse group of people, and in that time with that person, the idea is that you can ask them any question you like about their experiences, but in doing so, it's got to work both ways. The idea is that you don't actually criticise them or anything like that in exchange, but it's a place where you can discover what it is like to be, discover what it's like to be a teenager living in a gang, discover what it's like to be, from yesterday, the other week, a black person living in the UK in these days, or what it is like to be a gay person, or a policeman, or whatever. And I thought, what a wonderful idea that is, how rare it is to find a place where we can safely and comfortably explore those who are different from us and learn what it's actually like to be that person. And it certainly seems to be something that Jesus was very good at. He didn't seem to have any problems moving from relating with anyone, really. I wish I knew what his trick was. But if we're supposed to be like Jesus, surely that's something we should be working on, isn't it, as a church? How we can not only be at ease with and discover what it's like to be different people, but to encourage that wider conversation within our communities. And I wonder what that might look like in Wormley, what that might look like in our places of work, what that might look like in our schools, or even in the queue at Tesco's, one I'm always going back to as an example, just to try and root our faith. One of the things, recording this here in the woods, it's nice and gentle. I can hear the birds singing in the sun, but I don't know if it's being picked up on the microphone. Just over there, they're doing the building work, down building the new secondary school in Broxbourne. What would it look like to have this conversation in the middle of a building site? Tim often uses that example, doesn't he? I don't know if you've got any ideas of what that could look like, or how we could encourage that kind of exploration beyond ourselves as a church in our communities at all. Maybe I've waffled a bit there. I don't know.
I don't know about not waffle. It's the question. It's a difficult question. What can we actually do here and now?
Yeah.
And one of the things that seems to come from what you've been saying is that we need to listen to each other's stories. Now that sounds very easy, doesn't it? Yeah. But how does that work in practice? Well, you have to ask.
Yeah.
And don't be afraid to ask. One of the things, I mean, we can be a little bit kind of sensitive to being thought to be doing something wrong if we identify someone as different.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not the point at all. It's how we treat other people that's the point. It's not. People, different people with different backgrounds, different experiences, different ethnicity, different origins. Of course, they're different. But that's a wonderful thing. And so we can not be afraid and make an effort to actually ask. Yeah, find out about someone's background. And I'm talking to myself as much because I know in our just in our congregation, it's a lovely congregation, and I think that I get on well with everybody. But there's some people I don't know enough about their background really.
Yeah.
And I remember when we've had people speaking in our Sunday evenings, telling us about themselves. We found out some amazing things.
Absolutely.
What a wonderful bunch of people that we are, with so much experience. And so let's take the time, make the effort, and go and ask.
Actually, reflecting back on those evening services and the TV at the moment, I just spotted that Alan Bennett's Talking Heads is coming back on, being redone. For those who haven't seen it before, this was it the 80s? I think it was, wasn't it?
Probably.
A series of monologues that Alan Bennett wrote and performed, and was so engaging because you were sat there just listening to one person talking to you and sharing their story. Now, obviously these were imaginary stories, but he explored in them all sorts of backgrounds and ideas, and they're being redone. Just thinking about that got me thinking, would it be lovely for us as a community to do our own talking heads? We could, couldn't we? We could easily record a number of us giving out something of our story, whether it be in an interview or just people recording them on camera, sharing a bit of our faith, and then making those accessible on our website. Going back to our earlier conversation, there's something we can point people to. But if we deliberately made sure we had a range of people in there, who knows, maybe we could expand that beyond the church. That would be really fascinating, wouldn't it, to try and to do that with those who are, yes, Christian, but also those maybe who aren't, and listen to their stories and hear their views about us as well. That'd be fascinating. We'd learn from that. I'm very mindful of the time, David. I've grabbed David today in the middle of a working day. And so I think maybe this is a good place to wrap that up. But just before we do, two images from Scripture just to share. One is a famous verse in Galatians that talks about how in Jesus there is no longer Jew nor Greek, male nor female, slave or free. And we can add any sorts of divides in there, couldn't we? And I think Paul would encourage us to do that, to hear that in a contemporary context. And it can be very easy to hear that as saying, well, actually what we do is we iron out our differences and we ignore our differences. I certainly, for one, don't believe that's what's going on at all in that verse. I believe that there Paul is saying, or the Spirit is saying through Paul to us, that in God's eyes we are all welcome. We're all of equal footing, status in God's family as children, as co-heirs with Christ. We're all valuable to God. And why do I think it's saying that? Because if you go to the very end of the Bible in Revelation, there's that beautiful picture which we've mentioned a few times over the weeks in Revelation. I should have looked this up, I think it's Revelation 7, of the crowd gathered around the throne worshipping God. And it's a crowd made up of every nationality, every tongue, every race on earth. And the differences there aren't ironed out, are they? The differences there are made clear. We are different, but we are made equal because we come before God, and God welcomes us and treats us as equals. And that's what I would love the church to look like now. And that's that, going back to that image of Christ. How do we present who God is in the world? By being a family that lives and celebrates our differences and says, although we are different, there is value in our differences, but we are all equal before God. And I think that's probably a good point to finish, isn't it?
Yep.
I'd like to say thank you, David, for sharing your thoughts with us today.
You're welcome.
Thank you. A most surreal experience it's been, standing in the woods with the noise of
It's
building work
beautiful
in the
here.
background.
It's a lovely place.
It is. And actually, yes, if you've not been up to Topfield and Wormley Woods, I really recommend this as a place to come. There is shade, there is sunshine, all sorts of nature, and it's only 5 minutes walk away from Broxbourne High Road. Recommended. Well, thank you very much. Cheers, Dave.
Well, thank you, David, for being willing to share that conversation with me and allowing me to share that publicly as well in our service today. But I hope what we've done there is, although it's not a standard sermon, I hope it will still speak to you and God would speak through it as we consider together as a family. And I really want this to be a conversation as we consider together a family, how we can celebrate the diversity within our family, how we can increase the diversity in our family, and how we can maintain in that diversity our unity, that common identity that we have through God being our good Father. But I also want to continue a conversation about how we can, as a church, respond when we see disunity around us, when we see people being oppressed or treated with injustice. What is the best way as us as the church? And when I say the church, I mean either together or individually. What is the best way for us to respond to that? And Wynne challenged us, didn't she, a couple of weeks back in her own story. She talked about how can we respond? What can we do? And the best place to start is by talking, as we've thought there. But then she went on to say, because talking leads to action. What action is it appropriate for us to take as Christians, as part of the church? How can we do that in a gracious, loving way that doesn't provoke anger, that doesn't provoke argument, but maybe gently leads and encourages all on this path to becoming united in God's family, celebrating our diversity and yet rejoicing in the unity that God calls us to in our family. And of course, maybe inviting people to the Alpha course as part of that, as we discover our identity in God, discover our common image in us that He's planted there. Maybe that is part of the answer for finding our unity as a human race, not just as the church or not just as a community. Another way, of course, that we can do things is by doing things together. And a couple of weeks back, we were given yet another there are lots of challenges going on, given another challenge when we saw the video that Robson had a part to play in the Students Union, Christian Student Union Choir, doing their rendition of When I Survey the Wondrous Cross. And it was just, well, why don't we do something like that? And so the challenge went out to form the Wormley Warblers, or as it has now been called, the Wormley Lockdown Choir. And David Lockett and others have been working very hard behind the scenes to put the following video together. And so let's join the Wormley Lockdown Choir now and sing together the splendour of the King. So thank you to all involved. Let's worship with them. Well, wasn't that absolutely terrific? I'm sure you'll agree with me. Thank you, David, and all the members of the choir who spent so long putting that together for us. It was good to join with you in worship this morning. I wonder what our next challenge is going to be. Well, of course, talking of challenges, just a reminder that we're going to be meeting together in a moment for our post-service cuppa and chat. The link will be below the video here, as well as having been circulated by email during the week. Last week, Wynne did give us a challenge to complete, to bring to our cuppa today. So here's a reminder to get that ready if you haven't done so already. Wynne asked us the question, why were we given the name that we've been given? As in each other. Why am I named Ben? Why is Wynne named Wynne? Why did her parents give her that name? What were they thinking of? It's a good way, isn't it? It's a good conversation starter, but also a good way to begin to get to know each other. Perhaps this week you might like to set us a challenge for next week's cuppa and chat, or even for next week's service. See if you can get in there before Win does. Well, usually at this point we would turn to say the grace, but I just want to bring another reading before we do from Colossians. Cindy read from Colossians 1. I'm going to read it again from that same chapter, but Paul's prayer that is briefly before that. And I believe Paul's prayer is a valid prayer for us as well today, thinking of the theme we've been following. Paul wrote this: "For this reason, since the day we heard about you, we have not stopped praying for you. We continually ask God to fill you with the knowledge of his will, through all the wisdom and understanding that the Spirit gives, so that you may live a life worthy of the Lord, and please him in every way, bearing fruit in every good work, growing in the knowledge of God, being strengthened with all power according to his glorious might, so that you may have great endurance and patience, and giving joyful thanks to the Father who has qualified you to share in the inheritance of his holy people in the kingdom of light. For he has rescued us from the dominion of darkness and brought us into the kingdom of the Son he loves, in whom we have redemption, the forgiveness of sins." May this week, may we be filled with God's wisdom. May we bear fruit with him as we grow in understanding and in discernment, and as we seek to live our lives out as one family, united by the Son and sharing the joy that he has given us. And so as we close, let's say together the grace. May the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, the love of God, and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with us all evermore. Amen.
Is that recording? Yes, it's a square, isn't it? So that's one for the outtakes there before we even start. Fantastic. Now I've lost my train of thought. Isn't that
So
typical?
you can edit that out.
I can edit that out. It's the wonders. Or maybe I just leave it in. I don't know. We'll see where we go to.